Hi and welcome to DataTest. This time I'm reviewing Huawei flagship phone from just 3 years ago. Huawei Mate 10 Pro costed around $800 back when it was new. Now you can sometimes find it under $150. So is it a good deal? Well, I spent quite a lot of time with this phone and I will try to answer that question. Huawei Mate 10 Pro is phone released in late 2017 and it was the best Huawei phone at the time. I think that main difference between this phone and new flagships is the design. So let's start with that. Design of this phone is a bit dated, but in my opinion it still looks just fine. Bezels are a bit bigger in comparison with today's standards, but it doesn't look that old. Cameras are in the middle and they are elevated ever so slightly, which means that phone wobbles a bit when on flat surface. On the front there is quite large display. On the right side there are volume buttons and a power button. SIM tray is on the left. Phone supports 2 SIM cards but no expandable storage here. On the top there is microphone and AR blaster. Charging port is on the bottom alongside main speaker. I looked everywhere but the headphone jack is nowhere to be found. Front is made of glass, so is the back. Frame is made of aluminum. Honestly, it looks just like every other glass sandwich. It feels nice in the hand, but as every other glass sandwich, it is quite slippery. Phone has IP67 water and dust resistant certification. With that said, I would not rely on it. After years of use, glue that holds phone together will be probably melted, and there may be some gaps between the frame and glass, so I would not risk putting it into the water. There is a fingerprint sensor on the back. It is quite fast and accurate. You can also map to it functions like take a photo or show notification panel. When we are talking about security, phone does have face unlock. It is only camera based, but it works really good. Huawei gives you an option as well. You can go straight to home screen after unlocking, or you can swipe in order to unlock. If there is one thing that stands out about this phone, it has to be its display. It has 6 inches and FHD Plus resolution. That by itself is nothing special, however, it is an OLED panel with HDR10 certification. Display was very good for its time and it is still holding up. Yes, not as good as in some Samsung phones, but still. It is really bright with good visibility in sunlight. Colors can be also tuned to be quite accurate. There is one main speaker on the bottom and it is doubled with amplified earpiece for stereo effect. It is not the best or the loudest audio experience in the world, but it is quite enjoyable and the sound is quite clear as well. As in every flagship, specs of this phone were top of the line for their time. Now they are nothing amazing, but they can still put up a fight. This phone is powered by Kirin 970 processor and you can have it with 4 or 6 gigs of RAM. Mine has 6. I will put all the specs on the screen so you can pause and read them if you're interested. Huawei Mate 10 Pro was released with Android 8 and now it is running Android 10 with Emotion UI 10. This is most likely the final version of the software. When we're talking about software, you have probably heard of problems with Huawei not having Google services. No worries, this phone was released before the Huawei ban, so all the Google apps are here and everything works as it should, at least in the European version. Be careful when you're buying from China because Google services may not be present there. Okay, let's move on to performance. I'm gonna be honest here, this is one of the best optimized phones I've ever used. The thing is, most phones are getting slower as the time passes, but here it is just as fast as it was 3 years ago. Animations are smooth, there are no lags, stutters, nothing. Specs may not be the best anymore, but gaming is also possible and quite enjoyable. I was able to play on high settings in most even more demanding games, and it was still good. This level of optimization is quite rare in Android phones. Are there more powerful phones? Yes, there are, but will this be enough for most users? Well, I think the answer is also yes. Important thing to look after in older phones is battery life. You will be probably buying used, so it is good to ensure that the phone had very good battery life when it was new, so it is at least usable today. I can say that Huawei Mate Pro battery is just fine. Mine unit was heavily used for 3 years and battery life is still very much usable. It can get me through one day with no problems. However, this may differ depending on the device, but I think you will be okay in most cases. Battery itself has 4000 mAh and it supports 22.5 W fast charging, when you have the right wall adapter of course. Now we're getting on to not so great part about this phone, camera. This phone has two rear cameras, one 12 megapixels normal sensor and the second one 20 megapixels monochrome. Monochrome camera is helping with depth and sharpness, but you will almost never use it to actually take photos. Phone is natively outputting in 12 megapixels. In this mode you can use 2 times lossless zoom, but it is only digital, so the quality drop will be more than noticeable. Or you can switch to 20 megapixel resolution, then phone takes sharpness from 20 megapixel monochrome sensor and combines it with the main camera color. In this mode there is no zoom option. Look, this camera was not considered that good even when it was new. Not that it was bad, but other flagships were just better at the time. So as you would expect, the camera is not all that great today either. It still produces some nice looking photos with good dynamic range and quite low noise. However, these photos are in my opinion over-sharpened and HDR mode is making that even worse. When you turn on the AI mode, you will end up with very oversaturated and unnatural looking images. It is not all bad though. The night mode is very impressive. It takes long exposure photos without the need of a tripod. With this mode, night photos look actually quite good and there is a very low noise. When you don't like the over-sharpening and sometimes unnatural look, you can at least still turn on Pro mode, which lets you control all the camera settings and it can also output to RAW format. Photos taken with this Pro mode are many times, in my opinion, better. Of course, that only applies if you nail the settings. With video recording it is not much different. Camera can shoot up to 4K 30 frames per second. 4K videos are over-sharpened but not that bad looking. The bigger problem is that in 4K you don't have image stabilization, so without tripod footage will be quite shaky. Stabilization is present only in 1080p 30 frames per second, which is also the best looking. You can also record in 1080p with 60 frames per second, but the dynamic range in that mode is not very good. You can record in manual mode if you're into that, and just like with photos, this may help sometimes, mainly with white balance and focusing. This phone can also record slow motion up to 720p with 960 frames per second, but that is only for a very short time, and the result is impressive though not very usable. But there are other slow-mo options as well. Selfie camera has 8 megapixels and it can record 1080p video. It is not the best, but not the worst either. Selfies look fine and the bokeh effect works well, at least sometimes. Now I will show you a few samples, so you can be the judge. Now I'm recording in 1080p with 30 frames per second, and as you can see the stabilization is doing some magic here. It's way more smooth and way more usable. Maybe it's not as sharp, but I don't know if that's a bad thing necessarily, because 1080p is honestly enough in most of the situations. The dynamic range is also quite great. So, is this phone worth buying used? Actually, I think yes. Many times you can find it used for under $150, which is in my opinion excellent price. Because these phones were not very popular, they are quite rare and you have to look for a good deal. If you're thinking about buying used phone in this price range, you can also check out iPhone 7, Samsung S8 or Google Pixel 2. I think that for the price around $150, Huawei Mate Pro is a solid deal. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, feel free to leave a like or subscribe. And maybe let me know down in the comment section what kind of content would you like to see.